Hello everyone and welcome to today's Mondac webinar in association with Freshfields Law, who will be providing a deep dive analysis into regulatory and compliance issues within the Nigerian business landscape. My name is Dan Sampaio and I'm joined by the brilliant Frederick Cantillo to take us through today's discussion. Fred is a dual qualified Nigerian and United Kingdom solicitor. He has over 2 decades of practical experience in the corporate commercial, anti-bribery and anti-corruption, energy, litigation, employment and labour, shipping, government regulatory and compliance practice areas. He has and continues to advise international and local businesses on all aspects of establishing their operations in Nigeria, for obtaining all requisite government and regulatory approvals, interfacing with government agencies. Now, before I hand over to Fred, a housekeeping item. You can submit questions by typing them into the questions pane of the toolbar on the right-hand side of your page. We will endeavour to answer as many questions as possible during our Q&A session, but please do reach out after the webinar for any additional information you may require. It's now my pleasure to hand you over to Fred to begin. Thank you.
Thank you very much again, Dan, for very kind words, as always. And for the introduction. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to my audience, wherever you might be. I want to say thank you again for making out time to join this webinar. It's been quite an interesting experience all these months, taking one subject after another. And I hope you find today's topic stimulating, interesting, and refreshing. Dan, Aaron, can we go to the slides now? So today we're doing something which is very critical and very relevant. It's a deep dive analysis of compliance and regulatory issues in Nigeria. Just to say it at the very outset that the topic itself is clearly quite wide in scope, and some might say that this is rather an overambitious topic itself. So let me just say at the very beginning that we will not be able to cover the entirety or even majority of the various sectors in the Nigerian economy that will be of interest to a number of the participants in this webinar today, but we'll see how far we can go in our analysis. Aaron, can we move to the next slide, please? So I'm sure a number of those of you who are here in this particular webinar might be familiar with developments in Nigeria. Nigeria underwent a very contentious and quite difficult election at the federal level back in the month of February. The effects of the election and the disputes arising from it is still very much with us here in Nigeria. Whilst the cases are pending by those who lost the presidential elections petition tribunal, the man who was declared the winner in the elections was sworn in on the 29th of May 2003. And the interesting thing, which will set the tone for our discussion today, the fact that when he made this inaugural speech, the president touched on some very key and vital aspects of the Nigerian economy. And very quickly, he said that he was going to ensure that there is better ease of doing business in Nigeria. He was going to ensure that there's optimal and maximal utilization of the country's resources. He was going to ensure that the exchange rates was unified. As some of you might know, we have several layers of exchange rates in the country. which could be very complicated, at times. The president assured that he was going to ensure that foreign investors and all the foreign businesses who have funds trapped in Nigeria, and the sector which comes top on that particular list is the aviation sector, where we were told in the course of the week that the trapped funds of the airlines, it's a staggering 812 million United States dollars. So he's assured that those with trapped funds in Nigeria will be able to repatriate them. He is going to tackle the problem of insecurity, and he's also going to ensure that there is the eradication or the reduction of multiple taxation in Nigeria. Very ambitious words which were uttered in the course of the speech. The jury is still out as to what we're likely to see. So let's go to the next slide, please, Aaron. So I'd mentioned already what the president said in his speech, and so the jury is out for us to be able to determine what will come out of these promises, whether it will be backed up with action, or whether it will be the same thing that we are used to hearing by those who are occupying political office. So critical thing for anyone who wants to understand the regulatory and compliance space in Nigeria is to understand what the exemption requirements are for doing business in Nigeria. So the key thing that must be done first is to have your company registered. For foreign businesses, you need to have a share capital of 10 million naira in order for you to then be able to obtain a business permit from the relevant agency in Nigeria. Next slide, please, Aaron. Thank you very much, Aaron. So in the corporate compliance space, which essentially has to do with ensuring that you have all the necessary approvals and permits for you to be able to do business in the country. Beyond registering your business, you also need to be registered with the Nigerian Investment and Promotion Council, which is very key for any foreign investor coming to do business in Nigeria. You need to have all your tax registrations and critically your tax clearance certificate, which is a very important requirement when you begin to apply to various government agencies for setting licenses and permits. Next slide, please, Darren. So I talked about, having your business, permit, which is very key. And then a very key thing, which you see in point 5, is having your expatriate quota. We will be talking quite extensively in the course of this webinar on immigration related issues. So it's good for us to just say this at the very beginning. If you are coming into Nigeria to do business and your area of interest falls within the oil and gas sector, whether you want to invest in the upstream or the midstream or the downstream sectors of the Nigerian oil and gas industry, you must not obtain an expatriate quota, which we will speak about extensively in the course of the webinar, and you must not approach the Ministry of Interior, the Federal Ministry of Interior, which is the arm of government charged with the issuance of expatriate quotas as such, without first of all going to the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board, which is the foremost government agency in charge of local content matters. It's very key to bear this in mind. So you cannot obtain temporary work permits for anybody who's going to come and work in Nigeria on a temporary basis. You cannot obtain an expatriate quota. You cannot, do anything relating to processing for any approvals without, first of all, having the clearance or the permission of the board of the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring, board, the NCD MB. We're talking a bit more on the issue of the combined expatriate residence permit and alien card, the SEPAC, in the course of the webinar. Next slide, please, Aaron. So it's what you might say a given or an elementary aspect of all things that you must, of necessity, open a bank account in Nigeria, which takes me back to the earlier points that I made about some of the very laudable and lofty promises made by the president of Nigeria in the course of his speech. So you need to have a bank account opened. You need to process your certificate of capital importation, your CCI, which would enable you to import your or bring in your funds or your equipment or whatever it is you're going to be deploying in Nigeria. And so your certificate of capital importation, which you will receive from the bank through which you bring in these funds, will be key and critical for you at the point at which you want to repatriate your funds, your profits, your revenue out of the country offshore. So it is very important to bear that in mind. Next slide, please, Aaron. Yes, so these are the points that you see are itemized as 8 to 10 are also essential prerequisites or steps that needs to be taken in order for you to ensure that you are taking off on a very steady and smooth footing on a corporate basis for your business. So you need to have auditors appointed, you need to have a company secretary, and clearly, except you intend to run a virtual business, you will need to have a physical, office space, and so you will be engaged in some form of property acquisition or lease or a rental. Next slide, please, Aaron. So I did say at the very beginning that the thrust of today's webinar is, on the immigration laws in, Nigeria, because a lot of issues have arisen around some cases that sprung up in the course of the year and following from last year, where we saw some high-profile individuals who, working with some of the big companies in Nigeria, had serious issues with the immigration authorities, and there were allegations that there were infractions against the immigration laws, that some of these expatriates who are not just working in Nigeria, but are occupying some of the top positions in some of the indigenous companies in Nigeria had not been fully compliant in terms of their immigration status. Now, the Immigration Act of Nigeria is quite detailed and extensive in its provisions regarding the various steps and the various processes which should be followed for any individual who wants to come into, Nigeria. Now, the coming into Nigeria is usually for different reasons, which the Act clearly recognizes. So you could be coming for business, you could be coming, for as a tourist, you could be coming, just for the exploratory matters and all that. So the Act itself recognizes the wide spectrum of reasons for which anyone will want to come into the country. Next slide, please, Aaron. So just as I said, regarding the previous slides, the immigration, laws takes note of the fact, takes cognizance of the fact that one might be coming into the country on his own, and that is why we have some of you here on this webinar who might be contemplating perhaps extending your businesses into Nigeria. So in that case, you might want to make some exploratory visits to Nigeria. You might be coming in furtherance of an invitation from a government agency in Nigeria. You might be coming on the invitation of a potential partner in Nigeria with whom you want to collaborate. It is very critical for you, whichever might be the basis upon which you entered into the country, for you to understand the specific requirements of the immigration laws relating to your intended visits to Nigeria. Next slide, please, Aaron. So as is the case with most immigration laws of I want to believe most countries in the world, there is always that recognition of the fact that there are those who might have some diplomatic or political reasons for which they want to come into, Nigeria. And one might say, not in, in an irreverent manner, that in this case, there are those who, are in a higher category or who seems to have some, a form of exemptions or privileges attached, to them. People who are in the diplomatic, field or mission, they get to have some exemptions from what might be the strict requirements relating to others. Next slide, please, Aaron. So it is very key for anyone who wants to come into, Nigeria to do business, specifically to be able to show by way of, seeking approval from the relevant, government authority that you do have a reason for wanting to come into Nigeria. One might say that that should be more than obvious in terms of why anyone will want to be making an application to come to the country in the first place. Next slide, please, Aaron. So the same point we made before, those who have some exemptions that will not be put through the loops as others will be. Next slide, please, Aaron. So again, this is still continuing with the issue of those who are in the special category of those who have diplomatic reasons for wanting to come to Nigeria. I want to, assume that majority of those who might be here on this webinar would not fall into this, a category of foreign government officials. Next slide, please, Aaron. So it's very interesting, to note that the immigration laws recognizes, and very importantly, too, that recognition, is there, that some who might be intent on coming into Nigeria might intend to do so, not as a single individual, but might want to, come with dependents, a wife, children, relatives who might, needs to travel with them. So the immigration laws looks at those instances and also tries to make provisions or allowances for spouses and other dependents who might be traveling with the main individual to Nigeria. Next slide, please, Aaron. So, like I said, regarding the previous slides that we've looked at, the Nigerian Immigration Act is well-rounded in the sense that it looks at the various aspects, the different reasons for which some might want to come, into Nigeria, whether it's for business, whether it's for tourism purposes, whatever might be, the reason why a visit to Nigeria is intended. The immigration laws takes care of those situations. Next slide is Aaron. So a very key requirement for anyone who wants to come to Nigeria is for you to be able to obtain a residence, permit. But that is not even the very first step or a port of call in the process itself. So we'll come to these in the course of the discussions. Next slide, please, Aaron. So in Nigeria, and most likely that is what obtains in quite a number of other jurisdictions, also the Ministry of Interior, that is called the Federal Ministry of Interior, and the Nigerian Immigration Services are jointly responsible for issuing out the various permits and approvals that you will need in order for you to be able to enter into Nigeria to do your business. Next slide, please, Aaron. So what typically, happens for anyone who is intent on coming to Nigeria is that you have to apply at the Nigerian mission, which is situated in your country of residence. So that is always the first port of call. You apply at that particular place if you want to come into the country just in the first instance as a visitor. Next slide, please, Aaron. So when you start that process of applying just to get the initial visa to come into the country as an individual, if your situation is such that you are coming in furtherance of a business which you intend to establish, then some of the points we've made earlier about the need for you to have an expatriate, quota in place becomes critical. Next slide, please, Aaron. So it is very key to understand that the immigration laws in Nigeria is very particular about the employment of immigrants, or to put it more specifically, of expatriates in the country. There are quite a number of legislations which spells out what the process is and what the effects will be where there is failure to comply with the stated procedures or requirements. Next slide, please, Aaron. So, like I've been saying, all along, this whole process is managed firstly by the minister in charge of the Interior, and then by the Nigerian Immigration Service. And for those who are intent on doing business in the upstream, midstream, and downstream sectors of the oil and gas industry, you will need to have an interface with the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board. Next slide, please, Aaron. So, still on that a point of what and who and how we go about the process of ensuring compliance with the immigration laws for the purposes of employment. Next slide, please, Aaron. So we're now looking, specifically at the various reasons or areas for which one might be coming into Nigeria. And so we're taking it off now by looking at the business, purpose, which I'm sure will appeal to quite a number of the attendees on this webinar itself. Next slide, please, Aaron. So this again looks at the issue of the residence permit, which we will still touch on in the subsequent slides. Next slide, please, Aaron. Thank you. So still on the back of what is required to be, done when applying for a residence permit. So as I've said before, it is critical to note that the expectations or the requirements varies, where we're looking at an individual who is coming for either exploratory visits to see what possible opportunities there might be in Nigeria, and for someone who is coming as an investor who wants to set up his own, business. So those are two distinct categories which we need to bear in mind. Next slide, please, Aaron. So the issue of visiting permits is a straightforward, one, and I do know that a number of us, of those on the webinar today, might have at one point or the other been able to make those visits to Nigeria. So we're not talking about the casual visits, which are quite straightforward in terms of the handling of the process itself. We're looking at the aspect of those who are looking to come to do a business. Next slide, please, Aaron. So this tells us what, clearly would have been the experience of most on this webinar today, that the grant of even the visiting, a visa or a permit is all subject to the discretion of the immigration official whom you might meet, on the day. Next slide, please, Aaron. So still on the beat about employment of immigrants and the need for one to ensure that there is total compliance. Now, like I said a couple of slides, earlier when I started speaking, we have seen in recent times a number of companies, have been cited, particularly by the NCDMB, the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring, Board, for bringing in expatriates into the country without approval. So these companies have been cited for breaching the Nigerian Oil and Gas Industry Content Act, Industry Content Development Act 2020, which stipulates that before any expert is brought into the country, an approval must have been obtained from the NCDMB. That's section 33 of that particular, law. Next slide, please, Aaron. So still on the point of what is, required for someone who is visiting or on transit, which it's, like I said before, quite straightforward. Next slide, please, Aaron. So we're back to the point that I've said we're going to look at in a bit more detailed, form in the course of the webinar. So the controversy recently, and that has been so for a number of years now, has been with this whole system of the work permits, the expatriate quota, the temporary work, permits. There has been a very aggressive enforcement drive by the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board. They have a unit that is known as the Evaluation and Monitoring Unit. The Evaluation Monitoring Unit has that singular responsibility of supervising, investigating, and implementing the Act itself with regards to areas like ensuring that there is proper compliance with the requirements to obtain approval from the board before expatriates are allowed into the country. So what essentially this NCDMB is trying to achieve, because its mandate is to ensure that it grows Nigerian content. There has been some very lofty and significant milestones that they have set for themselves to grow indigenous and local, capacity. So because of that particular mandate and the fact that they are pushing themselves to achieve those milestones that they have set for themselves, they have come down heavily in a lot of areas on what is referred to as the abuse of the expatriate quota, the temporary work permits regime in the country. Next slide, please, Aaron. So, like I did mention, before, you cannot go to the Ministry of Interior to begin processing your expatriate quota, or go to the Controller General of Immigrations to begin the processing of a temporary work permit without, first of all, having received approval from the NCDMB. Now, when you fail to do this, when you fail to obtain the approval of the NCDMB, as has been the case with a number of companies the NCDMB does what it refers to as a non-compliance remediation program, a non-compliance remediation program. So if you brought in 2 expatriates without obtaining the approval of the board will say that you have to train 1 Nigerian. You have to train 1 Nigerian in a particular field or area which the NCDMB itself has already categorized or itemized or listed. And so if you bring in 10 expatriates without getting approval of the board might say you have to do remediation, you have to train 5 Nigerians, which will be given to you after some form of selection which they conduct. Next slide, please, Aaron. Yes, so this point takes us back to the 2nd or 3rd or 4th slide about those who are setting up businesses, and the fact that it used to be the case that you can apply for an expatriate quota and for a business permit simultaneously when you are obtaining or applying for your business permit. But because of what I've been saying about the role of the NCDMB and how insistent it has been on there being compliance with its own law, the law that established it, this is usually not what we see every day, in practice. So you cannot usually apply for both your expatriate quota and your business permit simultaneously. Next slide, please, Aaron. So that is just a checklist of the things you're required to attach. Next slide, please, Aaron, to your application. Still more of a checklist of the things you need to apply or attach to your application. Next slide, please, Aaron. So you need to know that once an application has been made for an expatriate quota, and again, bear in mind that you need to go to the NCDMB first. So this slide assumes that you've obtained the approval of the board, and so you've applied to the Ministry of Interior, and then there is what is called the initial quota that is granted is called an establishment quota, showing that it is a first quota you are receiving. Then you can proceed to apply for your expatriate what is called an STR visa. An STR visa simply means that that visa is being granted subject to regularization. Next slide, please, Aaron. So this again outlines what needs to be done in order to obtain the XTR visa. Next slide, please, Aaron. So this continues with what you need to do from having the STR, a visa granted to you. You can then proceed to apply for what I mentioned several slides, back, as the combined expatriate, residence permit, and aliens card. That is your SEPAC. And that, SEPAC itself, it's often referred to also as your green card, because then that gives you the permission to be able to reside and work in Nigeria without any disturbance at all from the immigration authorities. Now, the SEPAC is usually valid for a period of 1 year, after which it will be renewed. The expatriate quota is valid for a period of 2 years. The establishment quota, which is the very first, quota that you get at the point at which you apply for a new business, that has a lifespan of 3 years. Next slide, please, Aaron. So this just gives some further clarification on what you need on the STR visa process. Next slide, please, Aaron. We've talked about the regularization a bit, and how this can be done by local council or some immigration consultant or agent who would ensure that the STR visa then becomes eventually the SEPAC itself, which gives validity to the expat residing in Nigeria. Next slide, please, Aaron. So still for the clarification on the process of the SEPAC once you have spent the allowable period for your STR. Next slide, please, Aaron. Still for the clarification, so we can move to the next slide. Okay, so this again is part of what we've been saying, at the very beginning. But just to note here, that there has been some slight amendments to the duration of the temporary work, permit. We're still waiting to see why it seems as if there's been an abridgment from the 3 months to 2 months that has been, given when some of these applications are made. Next slide, please, Aaron. Okay, still further clarification on the 2 separate visas. Next slide, please, Aaron. Oh, we've talked about this extensively, so we can move to the next slide, please, Aaron. Okay, so we've also expanded on this. We can move to the next slide, so we can wrap this, up as quickly as possible. So we've touched on these also in the course of the discussion. This gives more clarity and details to the process itself for those who might be interested in having a bit more detail. Next slide, please, Aaron. So before we come to this particular slide, we are at the point of, wrapping things up. It is good to state here, like I did mention at the very beginning, that the topic itself is an extremely ambitious one, and we clearly would not be able to cover the various areas that might be of interest to some on this call, here today. And I have received some questions which borders on the sector, the electricity sector. Someone has asked that we should provide some sort of comments on the compliance issues in the electricity, sector. And again, it's good to just state this because that in itself, it's another webinar to talk about the compliance issues in the electricity, sector, because we have quite a handful of legislations in that regards, which is geared towards ensuring that those who are coming to invest in that particular sector are able to comply with the laws and various requirements in that area. So we do have a body within the electricity sector that oversees the the activities within that sector. The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, or the NERC, and so that particular body, just like some of these other bodies that I have been talking about, have that responsibility to ensure compliance. But we'll see what we can do in terms of the possibility of either having a discourse or a webinar on that particular subject, or perhaps putting up, an article to address some of the key compliance issues within that particular sector itself. And so I've also had another question where the questioner is asking us to talk a bit about, to analyze what the implications are for a non-resident, a foreigner in the country, and for offshore companies in terms of the tax implications and tax-related issues. Again, it is a very wide and technical area, the issue of taxation. And just as is the case in most parts of the world, people who are engaged in businesses, people who are investing, people who have set up companies in jurisdictions other than their own, always, beyond the initial, and one will say, the primary intention of making, profits on your investments, there is that concern about reducing the tax, the tax exposure to those, businesses. So, as I'm sure a number of you will be quite, familiar with, the boom and the mushrooming of tax havens, which seems to have come, seems to be something that has come to stay, with us, with all the various, implications that goes with that. The tax havens has been an avenue whereby those who have businesses are able to reduce as much as possible what their tax exposures are. So specifically, with regards to the question from one of the good listeners here in this webinar, Nigeria looks at whatever taxes one pays, whether as a non-resident foreigner or as an offshore company. Nigeria has several parameters by which it determines what amount of tax you will be obligated to pay, you will be exposed to pay. So there is that particular parameter of looking at the number of days that you spend within Nigeria, even though you might be non-resident. So it goes back to the whole business of the temporary work permit. What has happened in the past, and which was one of the reasons why there was a serious clampdown on the issuance of temporary work permits. Temporary work permits became an avenue whereby people or companies or businesses were trying to evade paying of taxes. So an individual comes in and stays in country for about a month or two, and then he leaves, and then comes back again after 3 months and stays for another month or two, and then the person leaves. So what the government then did to be able to ensure that this was not a loophole or lacune or a gap that was misused and abused, we have that particular provision for the number of days that you spend in country within Nigeria, which will then activate what is referred to as a tax, a tax consequence or the tax implication itself. And so that also applies to the issue of, a taxation for offshore, companies. So, yeah, so I see a question where one of those on this particular webinar has said that the Withholding Tax Act is not a law passed by National Assembly independently. Withholding tax is part of Company Income Tax Act. Withholding tax is advance payment of company's income tax. Thank you. So thank you very much, Maud. I hope that was the correct pronunciation, of the name itself. So a lot of quite interesting things have happened around the withholding tax, laws in Nigeria, and what is actually the applicable rates and how that is viewed. And just as you have noted, Maud, there has been quite a lot of discussion and debate around the whole thing. Yes, the withholding tax is an advance payment, and yes, you are able to then have your to claw back or plow back these taxes when you eventually do your reconciliations and all that. So it is still a bit fluid in terms of how this is perceived in some sectors. And what you find in actual practice is that there are quite a number of back and forth between businesses and the various tax authorities, whether it is the Federal Inland Revenue Service that deals with the federal taxes relating to companies, or whether you're then dealing with the various local tax authorities. But a very valid point you've made there, Maud. Thank you very much for that. Yes. So that is why it's correct. We don't have a withholding tax act. We have withholding tax, regulations. And so from time to time, you look up the regulations and look at what percentage is applied to these particular service and how that is then factored in into the computation of what is to pay. Thank you very much for those questions, and I'm sure there might be some more who might have some questions to ask. Some have put in the question in the chat box, like Maud has done. I greatly appreciate that. And thank you very much, everyone, for your time. I'm sure some of you have stayed patiently throughout these discussion. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you very much, Fred, for your time and your insights. We've really appreciated you sharing them with us. As Fred says, you can send your questions into us through the chat function, and please do if you have a question. It's a fantastic opportunity to have that question answered by Fred. We have a few minutes now, Fred. We might finish a little bit early. I did want to ask you though, Fred, if you had any key takeaways for our audience today, for them to leave the session, just one or two bits of knowledge or insights that you'd like to leave them with as they leave the session today.
Thank you very much, for that, Dan. So some of the key takeaways that I would say to those who are here, today, the Nigerian economy is looking upwards. There seems to be quite a lot of things that are going on. We have the Dangote refinery, the largest single train facility in Africa, perhaps in the world, which will be coming upstream either at the end of July or in the first week of August. It is going to drive quite, a lot of development. So that is something, to also look at. We just have a particular $500 million facility signed by one of the big companies in Nigeria, BUA, for relating to green cement, all part of this green transition. So Nigeria has a lot of things happening now. And I started off by detailing for us some of the highlights of the speech, the inaugural speech of the Nigerian president, which simply, in summary, says that Nigeria is open for business. So if perhaps you've not started looking towards Nigeria, this is the time, to do so, because there will be a lot of far-reaching, changes which will cut across all the sectors where there are likely to be interest from foreign, investors. But we've started from that, which is the critical bit. You must have your immigration status sorted out, because if that is not sorted out, it could be a huge, headache and setback, which, we will want to spare you. Thank you, Dan.
Excellent. No, thank you for that, Fred. And I think that's a fantastic place to end the session today a few minutes early. I'd like to thank Fred once again for your insights and being with us today. It sounds like there are a few questions that, as you say, could lead to further webinars. We need to explore them in a bit more detail. So we'd love to see you again. Thank you very much to our audience as well for being with us today. We really appreciate it. And for those questions, you will be receiving a recording of today's session. So please do share that with your colleagues, with your friends who would be interested as well. And we will be sharing a copy of the slides with you. So once again, thank you, Fred. Thank you to our audience. I wish you all a good day and say goodbye.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Thank you very much, everyone. I do appreciate your time. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.